The broadcast echoed through the void, a triumphant declaration of dominance. Grand Admiral Vorlag, a being of crystalline composure and unwavering conviction, stood before the galactic Dominion's high conclave. His form, a shimmering lattice of living energy and hardened light, exuded an aura of impeccable order. His voice, synthesized into universal common, resonated with cold authority. Earth, he proclaimed, had been contained. Its volatile chaos, its primitive defiance, its inherent instability had been neutralized. Orbital purges had reduced its primary population centers to glowing scars upon its surface. Its proud, yet barely nascent, fleets had been vaporized before they could even scatter, mere dust motes in the vast emptiness. The planet, once a vibrant blue marble pulsating with untamed life, now spun as a silent monument to the Dominion's ultimate, inescapable order. This was not merely a conquest. It was a cosmic lesson, a chilling message broadcast across every known system. Resist the harmonious integration, reject the guiding hand of the Dominion, and you would be silenced, completely. For generations, the Dominion had maintained a delicate, meticulously crafted galactic peace, enforcing it with an iron fist cloaked in velvet rhetoric. They viewed themselves as the shepherds of civilization, bringing light to what they deemed the chaotic fringes. Humanity, with its turbulent history, its fierce independence, and its unsettling capacity for both profound compassion and explosive violence, had long been an anomaly, a thorn in their perfectly ordered side. The Dominion had offered integration, assimilation into their flawless neural network, a collective consciousness where individuality was subtly smoothed into harmonious unity. Earth had refused, not with military might, but with a defiant, raw scream that echoed their entire planet's tumultuous past. A species born of a planet that knew geological upheaval, atmospheric extremes, and relentless environmental pressures could not be easily bent to an external will. They were harsh worlders, forged in fire and ice, and their spirit reflected it. The Dominion, blinded by its own technological supremacy and philosophical purity, had mistaken their refusal for weakness, their resilience for stubbornness. They had believed a few strategic strikes would shatter humanity's will. They had believed humanity could be silenced. What Vorlag, and indeed the entire Dominion, failed to comprehend was the true nature of that silence. It was not the quiet of eradication, but the grim stillness of an apex predator holding its breath. It was the calm before a storm brewed in the deepest, most resilient parts of the human spirit. It was the absolute quiet that comes just before a catastrophic rupture. Deep beneath the scorched crust of what was once known as the Siberian Shield, where permafrost still gripped the land in an iron embrace, Commander Valerius Thorn watched the live feed of Vorlag's broadcast. His command center was not grand. It was a repurposed subterranean research facility, a warren of cramped corridors and utilitarian chambers, its reinforced bulkheads scarred by orbital kinetic strikes that had shaken the very bedrock, threatening to entomb them all. Dust, fine and ancient, perpetually drifted in the recycled air, smelling of ozone, stale rations, and recycled hope. Every surviving system hummed with a desperate, strained energy. Valerius was not a man of grand pronouncements or heroic poses. His face, etched with the lines of relentless pressure and profound loss, was a testament to every battle fought, every loved one gone to the Dominion's orbital purges. His wife, his children, entire cities erased in a flash of unholy light. Yet he carried that burden not as a weight, but as fuel. His eyes, the color of a stormy, ice-bound sea, held a calculated, unwavering focus. He was not a brute, not a warmonger by nature, but a strategist, a survivor, forged in the crucible of his planet's extreme environment. He believed in one immutable truth: humanity endures. And sometimes, endurance looks like a fist slamming down on the unwary. He had personally overseen the construction of this hidden bunker, diverting resources, requisitioning materials from forgotten pre-purge stockpiles, and coercing reluctant engineers into working past the point of exhaustion. Every inch of this facility was a testament to Earth's defiant will, a monument to their refusal to simply perish. Beside him, Dr. Aris Varga adjusted a neural interface with meticulous care, her fingers dancing with a precision that belied the faint tremor in the repurposed habitat module they called their laboratory. Aris was an enigma. Tall, with an almost ethereal calm, she moved with quiet purpose, a stark contrast to the rough-hewn resilience of Valerius. Her expertise lay not in the kinetic devastation the Dominion understood, but in the unseen architectures of energy and thought. She was a xenolinguist, a bioengineer, and, most crucially, a master of resonance. Before the Purge, she had specialized in interspecies communication, studying the subtle energy signatures of alien thought. Now she was turning that knowledge into a weapon. The Dominion's technology, their very society, was built upon a vast, intricate network of synchronized neural tech, a collective consciousness woven through every ship, every station, every living Dominion citizen. It was their strength, their unity, the very core of their harmonious existence. And in Aris' hands, it was about to become their undoing. "They believe they have won, Commander," Aris murmured, her voice a soft, almost detached counterpoint to the distant thrum of the emergency generators struggling to keep the lights on. "Their arrogance is a perfect resonant chamber for our signal. It makes them vulnerable." Valerius merely nodded, his gaze still fixed on Vorlag's smug visage on the main screen, the chilling silence of the orbital purge still fresh in his memory. "Let them celebrate. The greater the fall, the louder the echo." He paused, a ghost of a bitter, almost feral smile touching his lips. "Is the retribution protocol ready, Doctor? The echo—" "The echo is fully charged," Aris confirmed, tapping a final, complex sequence onto a console. A soft, pulsating light emanated from the crystalline core of the device before her, a complex lattice of Earth-forged rare elements and scavenged Dominion resonance emitters, salvaged from the wreckage of their initial attacks. Targeting parameters locked. It will piggyback on their victory broadcast, a Trojan horse woven into the very fabric of their self-congratulation. Their network will accept it as an internal verification signal, a harmless burst of celebratory data. By the time their core AIs recognize the anomaly, it will be too late. The cascade will be irreversible. The Echo was not designed to vaporize ships or shatter planets, acts the Dominion understood and could counter. It was far more elegant and far more horrifying to a species that valued perfect order above all else. It was a psychoacoustic weapon, a resonance frequency calculated to induce profound cognitive dissonance and systemic collapse within the Dominion's integrated neural architecture. It would turn their perfect unity into perfect chaos. Ships would misinterpret commands, their sophisticated defense systems would target allies, and, most insidiously, the collective consciousness that bound the Dominion together would experience a rapid-fire sequence of existential dread, amplified paranoia, and sensory overload. They would be silenced, not by kinetic force, but by the relentless, internal screaming of their own minds. Estimated time to network saturation once the primary pulse is deployed? Valerius asked, finally tearing his gaze from the screen and turning to face Aris, his expression grimly resolute. Once the initial pulse penetrates their primary broadcast relay, less than a single Terran standard hour for systemic failure across all major network nodes, Aris replied, her eyes bright with a dangerous intensity that matched his own. The Dominion's absolute reliance on their collective mind makes them incredibly vulnerable to this particular form of disruption. They cannot simply unplug. Their very thought processes, their memories, their sense of self are interwoven with the network. To disconnect would be to cease to exist as they understand it. To self-terminate their own consciousness, a fate worse than any physical destruction for a species built on harmonious thought. A grim satisfaction settled over Valerius. This was not revenge born of blind fury. This was surgical, strategic vengeance, meticulously planned in the dark hours after Earth's sky had burned. They had studied the Dominion for decades through clandestine channels, understanding their strengths, dissecting their vulnerabilities, learning every nuance of their psychological makeup. The Dominion saw humanity as a chaotic anomaly, a species too emotionally volatile, too unpredictable for their perfect order. They had tried to prune the branch, to cauterize the infection, but had instead inadvertently watered the roots of something far more resilient and dangerous than they could have imagined. Earth's harsh environment had forged a species that learned to adapt, to suffer, and to fight back with an ingenuity born of desperation and an indomitable will to endure. Valerius stepped forward, placing his hand on the console beside Eris. The metal was cold beneath his palm, but a quiet, steady inferno burned within him, a fire that had simmered since the first orbital strike had painted his world with blood and ash. Initiate the launch sequence. Broadcast immediately after Vorlag's final statement. His voice was low, steady, devoid of fanfare, just cold command. On the Dominion High Conclave's central world, Xylos Prime, the atmosphere was one of serene, almost complacent triumph. Grand Admiral Vorlag concluded his address, his crystalline form shimmering under the ethereal holographic sun of the chamber. His words, delivered with perfect cadence, echoed throughout the vast open-air assembly. "Let this be a testament," he intoned, his voice resonating through every Dominion system, a pervasive hum of controlled thought, to the inevitable triumph of order. The chaotic whispers from the primitive world of Earth have been silenced. The path to universal harmony is clear, paved by our unwavering resolve and benevolent guidance. A ripple of silent, collective approval spread through the conclave. Across the galaxy, Dominion ships, perfectly synchronized in their orbital patterns, maintained their patrols. Planetary defenses hummed with quiet, efficient energy. Trade lanes flowed smoothly, every transaction meticulously accounted for. Every citizen, linked by the pervasive neural network, felt the reassuring hum of the Dominion's perfect peace, a shared sense of well-being and control. It was a silence, indeed, profound and absolute. The silence of a vast, unchallenged empire. Then a flicker. A fractional, almost imperceptible distortion rippled through the neural network. It was so subtle that the primary monitoring systems, designed to detect overt physical threats, registered nothing. It was not a data spike, not a weapon signature, but something far more insidious. It was a resonant echo, a phantom frequency, a ghost woven into the very fabric of their neural pathways. It began as a faint whisper, a barely audible static within the collective consciousness of the Dominion. A fleeting thought of imperfection, a momentary sensation of profound disquiet. It was a single discordant note in a symphony of perfect harmony. On Xylos Prime, Grand Admiral Vorlag felt a fleeting, unfamiliar sensation, a flicker of irritation, a momentary lapse in his perfect composure. He dismissed it as fatigue, a byproduct of the immense energy expended in the Earth containment protocol. But the flicker spread. Like a rapidly multiplying contagion, the imperceptible discord began to amplify. In the depths of the Siberian Shield, Valerius Thorn watched the primary Dominion broadcast relay shift from triumphant celebration to a bizarre, almost imperceptible stutter in its energy signature. A single, triumphant, and terrifying smile finally touched his scarred lips. The silence was breaking. "Echo pulse confirmed," Eris reported, her voice laced with grim satisfaction. "The initial wave has bypassed their primary firewalls. The network is assimilating it as a benign update, a final confirmation of victory. They are inviting it in." "Then the real silence begins," Valerius murmured. looking up at the data feeds that were now beginning to show subtle, yet critical, fluctuations within the Dominion's vast, interconnected systems. A single patrol ship in the Orion Arm, far from Earth and oblivious to its fate, suddenly initiated an unscheduled, violent, evasive maneuver, nearly colliding with a civilian transport vessel before its automated systems could correct it. A planetary defense array, designed to fire outward, suddenly pulsed with internal energy, its targeting systems briefly turning inward, then outward, then inward again, before stabilizing. These were minute anomalies, easily dismissed by the Dominion's self-correcting AI as minor glitches. But the Echo was not about direct physical destruction. It was about eroding the foundation, sowing discord from within the very seat of their collective thought. It was a cognitive virus, propagating through the very pathways that connected the Dominion's unified mind. The initial irritation Vorlag had felt began to intensify, becoming a pervasive sense of profound unease, a gnawing doubt that gnawed at the edges of his perfect self-assurance. He found himself questioning a protocol he had personally championed, a fleeting, horrifying image of a vibrant, uncontained Earth flashing through his mind. He shook his crystalline head, a desperate attempt to clear the thought. It was ridiculous. Earth was contained. Earth was silenced. In a remote Dominion research station orbiting a gas giant, a lead scientist, normally unflappable, suddenly began to weep uncontrollably. A profound, alien sorrow overwhelming his perfectly ordered mind. He saw images of his own cherished research. Years of meticulous data, suddenly fragmented, meaningless like sand slipping through his fingers. Another Dominion citizen, a humble laborer on an asteroid mining outpost, spontaneously dropped his tools, overcome by an overwhelming primal urge to run, though from what or why he could not say. The synchronized calm, the perfect harmony that defined Dominion society, was beginning to fracture, one mind at a time, each disruption echoing, amplifying, and infecting the next. Their collective mind was being torn apart from the inside. Back in the command center, the console screens began to display more pronounced red alerts. Valerius watched a tactical map of the galaxy, the Dominion's perfectly interconnected systems, normally a glowing web of green light, now beginning to show isolated blips of amber, then crimson, then entirely winking out as systems went dark. A subtle ripple of panic was spreading, not through comms channels, but through the neural pathways themselves, a wildfire of fear igniting within the heart of their empire. "They are experiencing localized cognitive overload," Aris reported, her voice almost clinical, yet with an undercurrent of cold, calculated awe. "The Dominion's perfect unity is collapsing under the weight of its own forced resonance. Their integrated minds are being bombarded with conflicting directives, phantom memories, and amplified anxieties. Their internal dialogue has become a cacophony of fear, a rising scream that only they can hear." Valerius closed his eyes for a moment, picturing the vast Dominion network, a shimmering web of interconnected thought, now convulsing, tearing itself apart under the invisible assault. He imagined the pure, unadulterated terror of a species that had never known true individual doubt, never felt a moment of discord within their collective, suddenly plunged into a maelstrom of psychological chaos. Earth's retaliation was not a roar that shattered their physical forms, but a whisper that dismantled the very core of what the Dominion believed itself to be. The silence on the external broadcast was still absolute. No Dominion alarms blared. No frantic warnings tore across interstellar frequencies. Their systems were still processing the initial victory signal, trapped in a digital loop of self-congratulation. But within their minds, within the very fabric of their being, the noise was deafening. Grand Admiral Vorlag's crystalline form began to vibrate violently, an external manifestation of the internal torment. He saw the faces of every species the Dominion had ever pacified, every world they had contained, swirling within his perfect, ordered thoughts, distorted and accusing. He tried to issue a command to rally his forces, to assert control, but the words were lost, drowned out by the rising crescendo of internal dissonance. His perfect, luminous form began to crack, thin fissures spreading across his crystalline shell. The Xylo's prime orbital defense grid is experiencing a complete systemic lockout, Eris stated, her voice sharp with discovery. It's not just confusion, Commander, it's self-preservation. Their systems are trying to isolate the infection, to purge it, but in doing so, they are severing themselves from the very network that defines them. They are isolating themselves, becoming fractured, disconnected. Valerius opened his eyes. On the main screen, the live feed from Xylo's Prime had frozen. Vorlag's image, mid-vibration, was stuck in a grotesque, silent tableau. The broadcast, meant to project triumph and absolute power, had become a perfectly still, perfectly ironic snapshot of utter, catastrophic failure. The galactic dominion had been silenced, not by kinetic force, but by the insidious ingenuity of a species they had underestimated, a species that turned their enemy's greatest strength into its most profound weakness. Earth had not just survived. It had resonated with a vengeance that shattered the very concept of galactic order, leaving nothing but fragmented silence in its wake. The silence was indeed complete. But this was only the beginning. The galaxy, having witnessed the Dominion's seemingly unshakable reign for untold millennia, would now feel the aftershocks of its sudden, inexplicable collapse. From countless systems, terrified whispers would rise, attempting to comprehend the impossible. And from the wreckage of that profound silence, a new, far more dangerous era would begin. Humanity, the architects of this quiet devastation, would soon find themselves navigating a galactic landscape reshaped by their own audacious act, a landscape where fear was now their greatest currency, and their future, irrevocably bound to the chaos they had unleashed. They were no longer victims. They were the catalyst. This was Earth's echo, and the universe had just heard it. What do you think happens next in this unfolding saga of humanity's fight for survival? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this glimpse into Earth's fierce retaliation, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like to ensure you don't miss a single moment of the story. Your support fuels our journey through the stars. The galaxy convulsed. The silence Grand Admiral Vorlag had envisioned, the absolute stillness of a perfected, unchallenged order, had been brutally shattered. Not by the roar of a new weapon, but by the internal, psychological screams of an entire civilization tearing itself apart. Across countless systems, the meticulously synchronized Dominion network, once the bedrock of their collective consciousness, fractured into a million discordant whispers. Ships drifted, their crews lost in a labyrinth of amplified paranoia and phantom memories. Planetary defense grids flickered, some turning their formidable energies inward, creating brief, terrifying flashes against the starfields before stabilizing into erratic patterns of self-protection. Trade routes, once meticulously flowed with goods and information, went dark as central nodes experienced systemic collapse, their complex algorithms unable to process the deluge of contradictory directives. On Xylo's Prime, Grand Admiral Vorlag was no longer a symbol of pristine order. His crystalline form had begun to weep viscous, luminescent fluid from unseen fissures, his internal light dimming, his movements reduced to spasmodic twitches. The last images his fractured mind projected were not of Earth's destruction, but of its resilience, amplified, distorted, mocking. He had sought to silence humanity, and in doing so had silenced his own empire, not with an explosion, but with the chilling, self-inflicted void of their own perfect unity. In the cramped, ozone-scented command center deep beneath the Siberian shield, Valerius Thorn watched the galactic map, a grim satisfaction battling with a gnawing sense of profound exhaustion. The green web of Dominion control was bleeding into vast, empty black. Aris Varga, her face pale but her eyes alight with a dangerous, calculating intensity, monitored the diminishing energy signatures. Dominion Core Network, 73% systemic failure, Aris reported, her voice hushed, almost reverent. 91% of all primary processing nodes compromised. They are attempting to self-isolate, but the infection is too deep. Their internal dialogue has become a screaming chaos. Valerius nodded, his gaze fixed on a cluster of blinking red alerts, then a series of newly emerging green nodes, signifying nascent, independent power surges. The silence is complete, Doctor. Now the aftermath. He knew what would follow. A power vacuum. A galactic free-for-all. Species long subjugated, now leaderless, would either rise in chaotic fury or cower in fear. Independent systems, once wary of the Dominion's omnipresent might, would now scramble for control. And at the heart of it all, a single, scarred blue marble, now viewed with a terror far greater than any the Dominion had inspired. Humanity, the architects of this quiet devastation, would be both feared and sought after. Feared for what they had done, sought after for the weapon they wielded. Immediate priority, Valerius stated, turning to a holographic projection of Earth's shattered orbital defense grid. Re-establish local comms. Prioritize the North American and African shield zones. We need to know who survived, who can still stand. Their resources were meager. A few salvaged energy cells, repurposed Dominion processors, and the ingenuity of a species that had always built from scraps. But they had the echo and the fear it had sown. Over the next weeks, the galactic response unfolded with a terrifying predictability. The sudden, inexplicable collapse of the Dominion sent shockwaves that transcended mere political upheaval. Many species, once beholden to the Dominion's order, saw an opportunity. The Sarnax, a reptilian species renowned for their ruthless opportunism, launched swift, brutal incursions into former Dominion client worlds, their repurposed Dominion frigates now bristling with their own crude but devastating weaponry. Their broadcasts were guttural, celebrating the fall of their former masters, but also issuing a chilling warning. Any who challenged their new dominance would perish. They saw Earth not as a liberator, but as a dangerous precedent. They believed they could replicate humanity's silent weapon, or simply conquer its creators. Meanwhile, pockets of independent, previously unaligned systems, wary of the Dominion's expansionist policies, now found themselves facing a new existential dread. The Xyler, a pacifist, energy-based civilization known for their advanced scientific pursuits, desperately sought information, their shimmering scout vessels venturing further into the chaotic void than ever before. They transmitted pleas across open frequencies. Not for war, but for understanding, for a way to restore balance to a galaxy now teetering on the brink of cosmic anarchy. Earth, once the prey, was now the fulcrum. And Valerius and Aris found themselves caught between the rising tides of a galaxy in turmoil. "Commander, we have incoming signals," a technician reported, his voice raspy from lack of sleep. "Multiple sources. Sarnax demands for echo schematics, Xyler pleas for humanitarian aid and technological consultation, and a broadcast from the Cygnus arm, unidentified, high-band encrypted." Valerius felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. The encrypted signal. That was the real danger. The Dominion had suppressed many things, but some truths were too vast to be entirely contained. "Patch the Cygnus signal," he ordered, his eyes narrowing. The screen flickered, resolving into an image of a being unlike any he had ever seen. It was vaguely humanoid, but composed of shimmering, shifting patterns of light, its form constantly in flux. Its voice, though synthesized into common, held an ancient, melancholic quality. "Greetings, Harshwelders," the light being began, its form rippling. "We are the Lumina, and we have observed. For millennia, the Dominion maintained a fragile cage around something far older, far more dangerous than themselves. They called it the Veilwalker, a primordial entity from beyond the known dimensional gates. Its hunger is for resonance, for collected thought, for shared suffering. The Dominion kept it contained, fed it carefully, used its latent power as a warning, a deterrent. Now your echo has shattered the cage. The Veilwalker stirs, drawn by the cacophony of fear and the raw, collective suffering of the Dominion's fall. It is coming, and its hunger is not for planets or resources, but for the very essence of conscious thought. The broadcast ended with a final, chilling image, a blacker-than-void ripple expanding at an impossible speed across the backdrop of the galactic core. It was not a ship. It was a tear in reality, a wound in the fabric of existence. Aris Varga, who had remained preternaturally calm through the Dominion's implosion, felt a shiver ripple down her spine. "The Veilwalker," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "The legends spoke of it. The Dominion sacrificed entire sentient species to it quietly to keep it sated. They called it harmonic appeasement." Valerius felt a wave of icy dread. This was the true cost of their vengeance. They had not merely defeated an empire, they had unleashed a primordial terror. The Sarnax were a nuisance. The Xyler were a fleeting hope, but the Veilwalker, that was an existential threat to all life. And it was coming for the greatest source of suffering and resonance in the galaxy. Earth estimated time to system arrival for the Veilwalker based on the Lumina's data, Valerius asked, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Aris worked furiously, her fingers flying across the console. "Initial calculations impossible. Its speed is non-Euclidean, but based on the observed expansion rate, 3 Terran standard weeks. Maximum 3 weeks. To prepare for something that devoured consciousness itself. Earth, with its shattered infrastructure, its fractured population, its meager remnants, faced annihilation from a horror beyond comprehension." Valerius looked at the galactic map, now a swirling chaos of red and black, with the terrifying, expanding ripple of the Veilwalker looming closer. They had struck a blow, a devastating, silencing blow, but in the grand scheme of the cosmos, it had been a mere echo. And now, the original primordial sound was coming for them. "Patch every remaining long-range comm array," Valerius commanded, his voice raw but resolute. "Every frequency, every system that can hear us, send a single message, unencrypted, to the Sarnax, to the Xyler, to every scattered Dominion remnant, to all who breathe, who think, who fear." Aris looked up, her eyes wide. "What message, Commander?" Valerius's face was a mask of grim determination. "Tell them this. Earth didn't just silence an empire, we woke a god, and now we fight it." He paused, his gaze fixed on the approaching blackness, "or we all perish in the quiet it brings." The transmission pulsed out from the ravaged blue marble, a desperate, defiant cry into the burgeoning chaos. It was not a plea for help, but a challenge, a declaration of war against an enemy beyond their understanding. The galaxy, still reeling from the Dominion's inexplicable demise, now faced a new, terrifying reality. The silence had ended, and what came next would determine the fate of every sentient being. Can humanity, the fierce, unyielding harshworlders, stand against a threat that devours consciousness itself? Will the fractured galaxy unite against this new horror or succumb to fear? If you want to witness Earth's desperate struggle against the ultimate silence, be sure to subscribe and like this video so you don't miss the next thrilling part of Earth's echo. The void shimmered. Valerius Thorn's defiant broadcast had ignited a firestorm across the fractured galaxy. For weeks, the cosmos had been a cacophony of fear and tentative hope, of renewed ambition and ancient terror. His message, raw and unpolished, had cut through the static of collapsing Dominion networks and the triumphant roars of rising opportunists. Earth didn't just silence an empire. We woke a god, and now we fight it, or we all perish in the quiet it brings. On the arid, war-torn plains of Xylos Roman IV, a former Dominion client world, the Sarnax warlord Krell crushed a communications device in his armored claw. He had heard the message, his reptilian eyes narrowed in thought. A god! He hissed to his lieutenants, the ground trembling under the synchronized march of newly forged Sarnax war machines. Or a new opportunity. The harsh welders speak of battle, of defiance. But if this Veilwalker truly consumes thought, perhaps there is a way to channel it, to use its hunger against the remnants of the galaxy, leaving only those pure of mind, those without weakness. Krell saw a path to absolute dominion, not through brute force, but through a terrifying symbiosis. His forces, already integrating salvaged Dominion neural interfaces, began to adapt their ships, not for combat, but for a horrifying resonance, a macabre attempt to control the very thing that consumed consciousness. They called their emergent philosophy the symbiotic path, a chilling perversion of humanity's desperate struggle. Meanwhile, within the shimmering, non-physical collectives of the Xyler, a desperate council gathered. They had received Valerius's message, but also the Lumina's dire warnings. Their very existence, built on interwoven energy and pure collective thought, made them exquisitely vulnerable to the Veilwalker. If it fed on consciousness, they were a cosmic feast. Yet within their gentle, luminous forms, a spark of defiance flickered. Elder Xylos, a being of pure, shifting light, broadcast a plea. To the extreme environment adaptives of Earth, we are fragile, but we understand resonance. We may not fight as you do, but we seek a path to unity, to resistance through harmony, not aggression. Your echo shattered the Dominion. Can it not also provide a shield against this deeper void? They began to focus their vast computational power, not on weapons, but on complex, counter-resonant algorithms, hoping to build a psychic barrier, a song of protection that might repel the encroaching silence. Back on Earth, deep beneath the scarred surface, Valerius Thorn and Eris Varga watched these galactic responses with a mixture of grim satisfaction and profound unease. Their command center, though reinforced, still groaned under the weight of a shattered world. Recycled air, thick with the scent of ozone and the metallic tang of desperation, filled the chamber. The Sarnax are attempting to co-opt it, Eris murmured, analyzing Krell's chilling new broadcast frequency. They believe they can ride the wave, become conduits for its hunger. They are twisting our weapon, Commander, turning Echo's very principles of resonance into a pact with oblivion. Valerius slammed a fist on his console, a dull thud against the salvaged plating. Idiots! You don't control a cosmic horror, you only become part of its meal. He looked at the Xyler signals, a faint, almost ethereal green on their tactical display. And the Xyler. Do they truly believe a shield of song can deter something that devours existence? Eris adjusted her neural interface, her eyes, though tired, holding a spark of scientific curiosity amidst the dread. Their understanding of resonance is different from ours, Commander, more holistic. They propose a frequency that disrupts the Veilwalker's ability to assimilate, a kind of cognitive indigestion. But it would require a planetary-scale output, a unified collective mind willing to face extinction to create the waveform. A feat that would push any species to its very limits. The days bled into weeks. The Veilwalker's approach was not marked by conventional signatures. It was an absence. Stars began to dim, not from galactic dust, but as if their very light was being absorbed, twisted, unmade. Outer system probes, repurposed for deep void surveillance, went silent, one by one. Their last transmissions were not static, but fractured images of impossibly bending space, of constellations warping into grotesque spirals, of blackness that was somehow deeper than the void itself. Within Earth's command center, the air grew heavy with a pervasive dread. Technicians, even hardened soldiers, reported vivid, unsettling dreams. Memories long buried resurfaced with agonizing clarity. The scent of ghost fires, the screams of phantom victims, the gnawing guilt of decisions made in desperation. The Veilwalker was not just approaching physically. It was beginning to seep into the collective psyche, a precognitive invasion, preparing the ground for its final consumption. It was the memory of every war, every terror, every personal failing amplified and weaponized. "It's feeding on our fear, Commander," Eris stated, her voice tight. "Its resonance amplifies our internal discord. The more we remember our losses, our atrocities, the stronger it becomes. It is a mirror, reflecting our darkest collective thoughts." Valerius felt the gnawing phantom pains of his own lost family, the phantom weight of every strategic casualty he'd ordered. He pushed it down, turning to the flickering orbital displays. "How far?" "8 days, Commander," a grim-faced technician reported. "Its expansion rate is accelerating, and we are detecting a new signature within the system. Sarnax's vessels, several dozen. They are attempting to establish a forward observation post near the outer rim of the asteroid belt. Not for defense, for communion." Valerius cursed. The Sarnax were too foolish, too hungry for power. Target their lead vessel. One shot. A message, not to them but to the Veilwalker. Earth does not welcome its embrace. The repurposed kinetic cannons, scavenged from Dominion dreadnoughts and jury-rigged with Earth-forged energy cells, powered up with a protesting whine. Their range was immense, their destructive power undeniable, but they were few. A single kinetic round ripped through the void, a silent spear striking the lead Sarnax dreadnought. It didn't explode. Instead, it dissolved, like a sandcastle in a tide, leaving no wreckage, only a shimmering afterimage before vanishing completely. The Veilwalker had claimed it, perhaps for its foolhardy attempt at contact, or perhaps as a subtle warning. The Xyler, witnessing this chilling display, intensified their counter-resonance broadcasts. Their collective hymn, a desperate, beautiful symphony of light and sound, pulsed from their core worlds, forming a fragile, shimmering barrier. But as the Veilwalker drew closer, even their harmonious shield began to ripple, distorted by dissonant whispers that threatened to unravel their very being. Then came the turning point. 4 days until contact. A series of distress signals, fragmented and desperate, erupted from a quadrant of space previously silent. Remnants of the old Dominion fleet, cut off and isolated, had been trapped by the Veilwalker's encroaching advance. These were not military vessels, but civilian transports, refugee convoys, carrying thousands of non-Dominion species who had been caught in the galactic collapse. They were fleeing the Sarnax, seeking refuge with the Xyler, but now found themselves trapped between a vengeful cosmos and an unimaginable void. "Commander, they are broadcasting on open frequencies," a comms officer reported, his voice strained. "They are begging for aid. Dominion, Xyler, Sarnax, even some human fringe colonies that broke away during the initial purge." Valerius stared at the tactical map. The Veilwalker's expanding shadow was about to consume the refugee convoy. To intervene would be to expose Earth's meager remaining defenses, to risk everything for beings who had once been their oppressors or their indifferent neighbors. His strategic mind screamed for cold, calculated self-preservation. But something deeper, an ancestral defiance, a shared experience of vulnerability, stirred within him. These were not the architects of the purge, they were its victims, just like Earth. "Eris," Valerius said, his voice quiet, raw with decision. "Can we modify the echo, a non-lethal pulse? A shield, not a weapon, something to disorient the Veilwalker, to buy them time, even a few minutes." Eris looked up from her console, her eyes wide with the enormity of the request. "A purely defensive pulse? Yes, Commander, but it would drain the echo, leave us vulnerable, and the resonance would be immense. It would expose our primary location, a beacon to the Veilwalker." "It's a chance to understand it," Valerius countered, his gaze firm. "To see how it reacts to a collective will focused on preservation, not destruction, and to show the galaxy that Earth fights not just for revenge but for survival, all survival." The risk was monumental. Deploying the Echo's full defensive potential would leave them defenseless for hours, maybe days, after the pulse. It would tell the Veilwalker exactly where its most potent irritant lay. But the alternative was to watch thousands, perhaps millions, simply erased. "Prepare the echo for defensive pulse," Valerius ordered, his voice ringing with a new, somber authority. "Full power. Target the Veil Walker's leading edge. We give them a window, a chance to escape." Eris, with a nod of grim understanding, began to input the complex sequences. The crystalline core of the echo throbbed with a deeper, more insistent light. Its hum filled the bunker, a resonating thrum that vibrated in their very bones. Out in the cold void, the desperate refugee fleet huddled together, a tiny cluster of fleeting lights against the encroaching shadow. Pilots screamed their goodbyes. Children wept silently in sealed compartments. Then, from the distant blue marble of Earth, came a sudden, brilliant flash of pure, focused energy. Not an explosion, but a wave of resonant light, a silent scream of defiance that rippled through space. It struck the Veil Walker's expanding edge. And for the first time, the consuming darkness flared. Not in pain, not in destruction, but in a sudden, almost human-like jolt of confusion. The Veil Walker's expansion stuttered. Its warped spatial signature momentarily stabilized, a ripple of chaotic energy flowing outward from the point of contact. It was not a defeat, not even a wound. It was a moment of profound hesitation. The refugee ships, catching the unexpected reprieve, ignited their engines, their last remaining power cells burning bright, attempting to slip through the momentary gap in the Veil Walker's advance. Most escaped, streaming towards the distant Xyler systems, a thin thread of hope in a galaxy consumed by fear. But a few, caught in the wake of the Veil Walker's flicker, vanished, their last thoughts and fears absorbed by the expanding void. Valerius watched, his breathing shallow. The tactical map now showed Earth, a tiny, glowing beacon directly in the path of the Veil Walker. The echo, having expended its primary charge, glowed faintly, a dying ember. They were exposed, completely. "It recoiled," Eris whispered, a tremor in her voice. "It recognized the signature of the echo, but the intention was different. It didn't expect a defensive act. It expected aggression. Our collective will for preservation was an anomaly it couldn't immediately process." Valerius nodded, a grim understanding settling in his features. They had not defeated it. They had merely confused it for a moment, but that moment had cost them dearly. Earth now stood alone, its primary weapon depleted, its location revealed. "Commander," a comms officer suddenly interjected, his voice high-pitched. "New signals, multiple, not from the Veil Walker, from within the system, human, from the asteroid belt. The new Genesis faction, they're broadcasting on a tight-beam, high-yield frequency." The new Genesis was a faction of human splinter groups that had emerged from the outer colonies after the Dominion's fall. They believed Earth had been a relic, its methods outdated. They preached a new path, a radical evolution, embracing the chaos rather than fighting it. They were rumored to be experimenting with forbidden Dominion and even Sarnax's biotech, pushing the boundaries of what it meant to be human. Valerius had dismissed them as opportunistic fanatics, more concerned with power than survival. The screen flickered, resolving into the image of their enigmatic leader, a charismatic, unnervingly calm figure known only as the Architect. His face was unlined, almost serene, his eyes holding a disturbing, alien light. He was flanked by figures whose forms seemed to subtly shift, their skin shimmering with odd, metallic iridescence. "Valerius Thorn," the Architect's voice resonated, smooth and captivating, yet with an unsettling undertone, as if multiple voices spoke through him simultaneously. "Your act of compassion has revealed your weakness. You cling to the old ways, to a futile struggle against what is inevitable. The Veil Walker is not an enemy. It is the next stage of existence. It is the purest form of collective consciousness, refined by suffering. We, the new Genesis, have learned to embrace its truth, to integrate. Your echo merely delayed what must come, but it has also shown us the path. The path to true unity, through shared experience." As the Architect spoke, The figures beside him began to subtly change, their forms merging and remerging, their voices blending into the chilling undertone of his speech. Their eyes, once human, now glowed with a faint internal light, mirroring the consuming blackness outside. "We offer you a choice, Commander Thorne," the architect continued, his serene smile widening. "Submit! Let the Veilwalker's truth flow through you, become part of the new Genesis, or be consumed alone and forgotten in the silence." The transmission ended. On the tactical display, the new Genesis ships, not fleeing but advancing into the void, began to change, their hulls rippling, becoming less like vessels and more like living structures. They were not fighting the Veilwalker. They were merging with it, their forms twisting and contorting into grotesque reflections of its consuming nothingness. Valerius stared at the screen, a cold dread far worse than physical fear gripping him. It wasn't just an alien horror they faced. It was a terrifying choice within humanity itself. A path to survival through assimilation, through becoming the very thing they fought. The Veilwalker had not just come for them. It had presented them with a new form of evolution, and a part of humanity had already chosen to embrace it. 3 days until contact, and the true battle for Earth's soul had just begun. Will Valerius Thorne and the Harshwelders of Earth stand against this ultimate, seductive silence, or will they too succumb to the terrifying promise of new Genesis? What new horrors will the Veilwalker unleash, and what desperate sacrifices will humanity make to preserve its very essence? If you're captivated by this unfolding cosmic struggle, remember that Earth's greatest defense against the Veilwalker wasn't a weapon, but an act of defiance through unexpected compassion. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's the only way to ensure you don't miss the epic conclusion of Earth's fight against the void itself, and the shocking truth of its origins. 3 days. 3 Terran standard days until the Veilwalker, a tier in existence itself, consumed all. Valerius Thorne stood on the command deck, the air thick with the metallic tang of recycled life support and a pervasive existential dread that seeped into the very walls of the Siberian bunker. The Veilwalker's advance was no longer just an expanding shadow. It was a psychic wave, pressing on every mind within the solar system, amplifying the memories of loss, of every personal failing, every societal scar. Soldiers trembled at their posts, not from physical fear, but from the unbearable weight of internal recollection. On the main tactical display, the terrifying image of the new Genesis ships, now contorting and merging with the encroaching void, solidified. The architect's voice, calm and seductive, yet layered with alien echoes, continued its broadcast, a twisted invitation to oblivion. Embrace the ultimate consciousness, Valerius Thorne. Let the pain end, become one with true unity. Simultaneously, frantic new signals burst forth from the outer system. The Sarnax, in their blind arrogance, had pushed too far. Their symbiotic path, vessels bristling with salvaged Dominion tech and Sarnax bioenhancements, had attempted to merge with the Veilwalker's leading edge, believing they could control it. The result was horrifying. On the main view screen, a Sarnax dreadnought, mid-transmission of a triumphant roar, simply dissolved. Not vaporized, not exploded, but unmade, its substance unwound into a spiraling vortex of non-existence. Its final collective thought, amplified by the Veilwalker, was a single piercing scream of pure, unfiltered terror that echoed through every connected human mind. Then, silence. The Veilwalker pulsed, its shadow expanding with renewed, horrifying vigor. It had consumed. It had learned. It had grown. The Sarnax, they became fuel, a comms officer whispered, his face ashen. Valerius felt a cold, hard knot of resolve settle in his chest. The foolhardy path of assimilation, it offered them unity, it gave them oblivion. He turned to Aris Varga, whose face was pale, but whose eyes burned with furious concentration over the Echo's crystalline core. Aris, the Xyler, their counter-resonance, Can we amplify it, merge it with the echo's remaining power? Eris nodded, her fingers flying across the console. Their song of protection is a frequency designed to disrupt the Veilwalker's cognitive assimilation. It causes interference, like trying to record a harmonious symphony on a broken phonograph, but it's not enough to repel it. It only causes dissonance. We need something more. We need an anti-resonance. Explain, Doctor. Fast. The Veilwalker feeds on suffering, on the collective memory of trauma, of discord. It gains strength from our worst impulses, our history of violence and self-destruction, Eris explained, her voice quickening. Its core resonance is suffering. To wound it, truly wound it, we cannot simply negate its frequency. We must generate a resonance so profoundly alien to its nature that it cannot process it, cannot assimilate it. A resonance of pure creation, of unburdened joy, of conscious, deliberate empathy. Things it has never consumed, never understood. Valerius stared at her, the enormity of her proposal settling in. To weaponize joy, to fight a cosmic horror with compassion. It was absurd, beautiful, and utterly human. And how do we generate such a thing? Our minds are currently being bombarded with the very despair it feeds on. Not all minds, Commander, Eris countered, her gaze shifting to the battered, grim faces of the bunker crew. We are extreme environment adaptives. We are survivors. We have known the deepest despair, yes, but we have also known the fierce joy of survival, the triumph of ingenuity. The quiet strength of shared purpose. We need to focus that. The Xyler's pure harmony provides the baseline. The echo can amplify it. But the source must be us, all of us, consciously, deliberately, every surviving human mind. Valerius looked at the tactical map. The Veilwalker was only hours away. The new Genesis ships, now distorted biomechanical extensions of the void, were forming a living barrier, guarding the path to assimilation. This was it. The final, impossible gamble. Broadcast on all remaining channels, Valerius commanded, his voice raw but unwavering. Patch into the Xyler Collective, to any remaining refugee ships, to every human survivor within range. Tell them to focus, not on their pain, not on their fear, but on their greatest moments of creation, of triumph against impossible odds. The first time they saw a new star, the joy of holding a child. The moment a broken machine sparked to life. Every act of defiance that wasn't born of vengeance, but of the stubborn will to build. The message pulsed out, not a cry for help, but an impossible directive. Across the solar system, within hastily repaired bunkers, on the few surviving refugee transports now gathered near the Xyler's trembling defensive barrier, and even amongst the dwindling forces loyal to Valerius, humans paused. They closed their eyes. Memories not of fire and ash, but of sunlight on a newborn's face, of a scientific breakthrough, of a shared laugh, began to surface. It was a faint, almost imperceptible hum at first, a collective thought, a shared act of profound vulnerability. The Veilwalker pulsed, its expansion momentarily faltering as if tasting something utterly foreign. The new Genesis ships, now an almost seamless extension of the void, surged forward. "You cling to weakness," the architect's multi-layered voice boomed, directly into Valerius's mind. "You fight the inevitable. Embrace eternity." "Not this eternity," Valerius snarled, turning to his comms officer. "Full defensive fire on the new Genesis advance. Hold the line by Eris time." The few remaining human frigates, cobbled together from Dominion wreckage and Earth-forged components, surged forward. They were outmatched, outnumbered, their hulls scarred. But they fought with a grim determination, their energy weapons tearing at the twisting forms of the new Genesis vessels. They were defending a different kind of weapon, a different kind of retaliation. Eris, her face streaked with sweat, activated the modified echo. The crystalline core flared, not with destructive light, but with a pure, white brilliance. The Xyler's harmonic frequencies intertwined with the echo's resonance, forming a complex waveform. And then, the collective human consciousness, vulnerable yet defiantly creative, poured into it. It was the whisper of first steps, the triumphant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the silent awe of staring at the cosmos, the laughter of children, the deep, abiding love for a lost one that refused to become a source of pain. It was humanity's spirit, distilled not into anger, but into a profound, defiant affirmation of life. The wave of anti-resonance erupted from Earth. It wasn't a blast, but a field of pure, incompatible energy. It struck the Veilwalker's leading edge, and for the first time, the cosmic horror shrieked. Not a sound in the vacuum of space, but a scream that vibrated in every mind, a high-pitched cacophony of agony and confusion. The Veilwalker recoiled violently, its consuming blackness rippling and distorting, as if suffering a seizure. It began to tear at itself, its vast, formless presence contorting, its tendrils twisting inward, trying to escape the unbearable purity. The new Genesis ships fused with its essence, shattered. Their biomechanical forms imploded, spewing fragmented memories, twisted emotions, and the echoes of the architect's maddened laughter, now sharp with betrayal and agony before they too vanished into silence. The Sarnax's vessels, those that had not been consumed but merely touched by the Veilwalker, convulsed violently, their internal systems overloaded by the backlash of incompatible frequencies. They writhed, then went dark, their pilots and crews driven to catatonia by the sheer, unprocessable force of Earth's anti-resonance. Their arrogance had doomed them. The Veilwalker, convulsing and shrinking, seemed to struggle against its own nature. It had consumed suffering for millennia, processed and amplified it. But this was an alien concept, a resonance that overloaded its very being. It was repelled, not by force, but by the sheer, unyielding incompatibility of pure, unadulterated human creation. It was the ultimate indigestion. Slowly, agonizingly, the vast, consuming shadow began to retreat. It didn't explode or shatter. It simply unwound. Like a wound stitching itself closed, it pulled back, contracting into the deeper void, leaving behind a scarred, trembling space where stars had once been consumed. The pressure in human minds eased, replaced by a profound, weary calm. The Veilwalker was gone. Not vanquished forever, perhaps, but certainly driven back, its hunger disrupted, its nature challenged by something it had never encountered before. The Xyler's collective broadcast intensified, their harmonious song now one of profound relief and gratitude, resonating with the lingering anti-resonance from Earth. The refugee ships, having slipped through the brief opening Earth provided, continued their desperate flight, but now with a new destination in mind, Earth. They had witnessed, they had remembered. In the Siberian bunker, Valerius Thorn collapsed into his chair, breathing shallowly. Aris Varga, exhausted but triumphant, leaned against the humming, depleted echo. "It recoiled," she whispered, her voice thick with wonder. "It didn't understand. It simply couldn't process us." Valerius looked at the tactical map. The Veilwalker was a distant, dwindling flicker. Earth, though battered and scarred, still glowed, a blue marble of defiant light. The new Genesis threat was eliminated, its dangerous ideology shattered by its own folly. The Sarnax broken. The Xyler, now firm allies, broadcasting messages of unity and assistance. The immediate conflict was resolved. Earth had faced a cosmic horror, not with its old vengeance, but with a new, profound, and utterly human strength. They had retaliated against obliteration, not with destruction, but with creation. The galaxy remained fractured, but it was no longer silent. Whispers spread not of fear, but of awe. Earth, the Harshwielders, had not just silenced an empire. They had faced oblivion itself and, by embracing their purest essence, had forced it to retreat. They were still feared, yes, for their capacity for fierce retribution. But now they were also respected, perhaps even revered, for their unexpected capacity for empathy, for their willingness to risk all to save even those who had once sought their downfall. The scars on Earth's surface remained, a permanent reminder of the Dominion's purge. The Echo, now silent and cool, a crystalline testament to their ingenuity and sacrifice, sat at the heart of the bunker. Valerius Thorn, now a figure of weary legend, stood by Eris's side. They had survived. They had won. But the universe was vast, and the Veilwalker, though wounded, still existed, a lurking shadow that might one day return. But next time, Earth would be ready. And they would be united, not just in vengeance, but in the fierce, unyielding spirit of humanity itself. They had shown the cosmos that Earth's ultimate retaliation wasn't just about silencing an enemy. It was about roaring back with the vibrant, undeniable song of life itself. What do you think of Earth's ultimate defense against a cosmic horror? Let us know your favorite moment from this final part in the comments below. If you were thrilled by this epic conclusion to humanity's fight for survival, please consider subscribing and giving this video a like. Your support fuels more incredible HFY stories like this one.